Hello everyone. So in this video we are going to be building a simple shortener URL using Flask. All right, so let's get coding then. Okay, so always remember, before you start building any projects like in Python where you have to install dependencies, ensure that you create and activate your virtual environment. So I already have my virtual environment created, but for those that don't know how to create it, this is the command for you to create it, whereby your env is the name of your virtual environment and the vnv is the command that you would use to create said virtual environments. So to activate it, I am on a Mac. I can easily do source/env/bin/activate to activate my virtual environment. If you are on a Windows or a Linux, yeah, if you are on a Windows, the command to activate it would be on the video. All right, so now since this is a Flask project, there are two dependencies or two packages that we would need to before we start building out our application. So we can do pip install. We will need Flask and then Flask SQL Alchemy. I already have okay, sorry, install double L. Yeah, I missed that initially. So I already have mine installed. So it will just show requirements already satisfied. And then we can start building our project. So you can create a Python file in your project directory and name that app.py or main.py. You can use whatever you want to use. Now for me to start, I would need to call my packages. So I will say from Flask imports Flask. I know this sounds very weird, but it makes sense in a second. So after I install Flask, I need to install requests, import render templates, because we would be creating a simple HTML file that we will use to convert, to take the URL from the user and convert it or shorten that. So render templates and redirect. So these are the functions we would be importing from Flask. Next up, we want to also import some things from Flask-SQLAlchemy. So we do Flask-SQLAlchemy, then we do imports alchemy. Now, the SQLAlchemy is what we would be using to create its local database, like an SQLite, which we want to use to store our URLs, because the idea is for us to save the URLs gotten from the user and also save the short code and have a way to find the original URL using the short code. This may sound gibberish, but it will make sense in just a minute. So after we've imported this, next we need to import. So we'll be using the string function and the random function. So I have made a video on how exploring using the random function. I will be linking that in the video description if you are curious to know what I built. So now that we've already imported the dependencies or the packages that we'll be needing to build our project, next up let's us start building our Flask application. So we're going to start by app Flask brackets name. So I think this is to initialize our Flask application. The next step, let us configure our database. So we're going to do it app.configure brackets SQL Alchemy database URI. Oh, my bad. This should not be and that it should be in these brackets. Okay, all right, and then we would define our SQLite urls.db. So this will be the name of our SQLite. Okay, next up is to define our database. So it will be database, I'm sorry, db equals to SQLAlchemy in brackets app, this app. Okay, so we have initialized our Flask application, and we have initialized, or yeah, we've configured our database. So next up, let us use ORM, which is object relational mapping, to create tables within our database. I think this is one of the fun things about Python that I really like. I haven't really tried using ORM in any other programming language, but thanks to ORMs, I necessarily don't have to write any SQL queries if I need to query or retrieve or create tables in a database. I find this very, 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 very helpful. Okay, so we start by creating class. Okay, and how we create ORMs is by defining models. I would show you that in a minute. So we are going to create a class URL, and in brackets we're going to do db, which is this database dot model, and there are three fields or three columns that we want to create in this table. It will be the ID. We want a custom way to identify the URL that we've saved on our database, and we can do that by ID. And ID would have an integer, and it should be a primary key. Equals to through. So next we want to save the original URL, and to still be a column, db column, but this column would be in a string format, and the string would only be, let's say, 100, no, let's do 200 characters, or should we do 300? Yeah, you know what, let's just do 500 characters. Okay, and it will not be a nullable field. Sorry, it's not be nullable. So next up, we want to save the shortcode that redirects the user to the original URL. So we're going to do shortcode db colon, and it will still be a string, but this time around, let's say it will be 15 characters here, and it would be unique. Hence, two different URLs would not have the same shortcode, and that would make it very, very easy, because if in your database two different URLs have the same shortcode, one user would be redirected to redirected to a different URL that they did not even send to us. Hence, we need to make the shortcode unique to the URL, and it will be nullable. The nullable will be false as well. So this is how we can create columns in our database. Yeah, I know, that's fun. Okay, so next up, let us create the functions, or yeah, let's create the function that will generate the shortcode. So we're gonna do def generates shortcode, and we are going to be taking the length of the shortcode. So let's say the length of the shortcode would be 10, and then we are going to okay, then we are going to define a variable characters, and these characters would be mixed with both strings and number. Hence, we get to use this string and the random Python function that we have already imported. So we're going to do ASCII. Sorry, it's going to be string. Sorry, it's going to be string dot ASCII letters plus string dot digits. All right, and then we are going to be returning the character join, but we're going to be returning it in a random way. Okay, now, okay, let me just finish this function and then I would explain it better. It's going to be random the choices, the character, and the length. This length here. Okay, so what this function does is it's forced to create a short code, and the short code would be string. Now under the string, if you see the ASCII letters, let me just make it bold for you to see. ASCII letters, it's a string that contains all the ASCII letters. So we are going to be mixing that with digits, a string that contains all the decimal digits, and then we are going to be using the random Python function to create a random 10 characters that has both letters and digits in that mix. So that's what this function does. Now that we are done with that function, next up, let's us add a little function that should create our database before we make any requests. So we're going to do at app dot before requests, and then function creates table. It's going to be this db dot create all. So what this does is that it's going to create the columns that we have defined in the URL class model. It's going to create that in our SQLite database. Now that we've already covered that, let us start building out our routes. So we're going to start by the first route, which would be an index route. So this route would take the user's URL and then return the generated shortcode. So we're going to start by at app.routes. Yes, in Flask, for you to define a route, you define it by at app.routes. Then in brackets, we define the paths. So we just want the paths to be, slash, and then let us define our methods, and we want the method to be both a get and a post method. So we can do this posts method. All right, so next up, let's create our index function, the function that does what I just explained. So it's going to be index, and then we're going to say if requests dot method is a post method, we are going to take the original URL from the request form, and we would be defining that as URL, and then we would generate the shortcode as this function that we created over here. So you can just copy that, paste here. Sorry, this shortcode should not be under this class. I think that's why, yes, that's why it wasn't showing here. I'm sorry, that was why it wasn't accessible in that place. Then we'll be generating the shortcode after we take the URL. Next up, we'll generate a new URL. But before we generate the new URL, we would love to save the URL that we got from the user and save the shortcode that we generated on our database. So that's what this line does. So maybe the session add, sorry, dot add in brackets new URL. And then, oh, essentially, what this does so far is we are going to take the URL from the user who generates the shortcode, and then we would add both the shortcode and the original URL to a variable. Use said variable to update the table that already exists in our database. Save that, and then we return an f string that says shortened URL is request dot host slash, yes, slash shortcode. Now request.host is when we run our Flask application, we can access it. That's when we run it locally. We mostly access the application via localhost or 127.0.0.15 then ports 5000. So what we are doing here is the hosts, that's the 127.0.0.1 port 5000 slash this shortcode that was generated. When the user clicks on that, they would be redirected back to the original URL that they gave us. And once we do that, we need to also remember we would be creating a very simple basic HTML file. We would need to also return or render our HTML templates. We do that, and the HTML templates will be defined as .html index.html. All right, so after that, we need to create another route that has the shortcode. Yes, another route of the shortcode, and that route will just be redirecting the user to the original URL. So remember I said you start creating a route by app.routes, and this time the paths, we want to define the paths by shortcode, but it will not be any method since we are mostly using this route for redirection purposes. So then we're going to create a function which should be redirects URL by using the shortcode. We're going to create a variable called URL entry, where we would be making a query to our database. This be making a query to our database, and we would be filtering said query by the shortcode, hence why we needed to also make the shortcode unique. So we'll be filtering by the shortcode. Filtering shortcode. So we'll be filtering by the shortcode to get the original URL, and then we do a little error handling that would say that if the URL entry exists, redirect to the original URL. If it does not exist, say URL not found. And the URL entry is going to be return redirects URL entry dot original original URL. It's like I'm not spelling that correctly. Original URL. Then we say else return URL not found. It's going to be a 401 error. And this is everything. This is all the logic that we have for our URL shortener. Next up, let us create our HTML file. Now to create that, create a folder, name it templates, create a file, name it, create a file, name that index.html. And I had this HTML file so I just copied it and pasted it here, and this is our HTML file. Remember, it's something very basic. You can decide to make yours to give it more life, to use CSS and some other things, but for the sake of this guide, it's going to be very, very basic. So just the title, enter a URL, a post form. Remember here when we said that we want the request to be posts. So a post form, and we are taking the URL from the user as a URL variable. Hence this request.form, that is URL that is request.form URL. So this is all the logic that we need in this. Okay, now before you test your code, this is something that I do whenever I am pushing my code to a public repository for anyone to play around with. I always do pip freeze. Now pip freeze shows me all the dependency that has been installed within my virtual environment, which are these, and all I just have to do is add all these dependencies into a request.txt. So you do pip freeze this as this. I think this should either be greater than or less than, then requirements.txt, and it automatically creates a requirement.txt with all the said dependencies that we already have in our projects. Now, something else that I genuinely think that some people seem to forget about, and I know that I faced this error when I first started out building in Flask, was now our code is correct, but something is missing. Now, if I run python app.py, the project will not run. Oh, sorry, this was supposed to be 3 slashes. And yes, it even said here that this is the SQL URL correct format. So now that we have corrected that, if we run this project, the project will not start, but it will definitely initialize our database, but it will not create anything because we've not played around with any of the routes, because no data has been created. Now, for you to run your Flask application after you have written your logic, for you to run your Flask application, there's something that you need to add at the bottom, and that should be able to initialize your Flask project. And it's this if name equals to main, do app.run, and you can decide to leave it like this, but since we are in development mode and we want to fix any error or make things easy for us to debug, we can add debug equals to true here. And now if we run our project again, it should run. Now this is how you can run your projects. Okay, so now for you to access your your project, your define HTML file, you just have to click this and it should show this to you. Daily Dev should open on it on here, but if it does not, so Daily Dev is a platform where you can read numerous articles. You can read any single article you want to read, any tech articles that you want to read. So okay, let us create the shortened URL of this project, of this article, or rather this newsletter. So now that we've copied that, let's go back to our projects. We impute that and we click shorten, and it gives us the shorten URL. Now if we copy this and we paste, it should take us back to the newsletter. Now this is fun, and this is a fun, exciting project for anyone just starting out in Flask. Now let me show you that our data has been saved. Now if you click on your urls.db, you should be able to see an ID that is unique to the data that you saved, the original URL, and the shortcode of said URL. And something else that I also wanted to show you in our in our index function that we said shorten URL is the request.host slash hotcode, the request.host, which is this, the request.host, which is this, and this slash the shortcode redirected us back to the URL that we gave the project. It is, sorry, that we gave to our projects. So this is a simple way, or yeah, this is like a simple project that you can build if you are just starting out in Flask and you are eager to build projects using the Flask web framework. So over the coming months, or over the coming days, I would be creating more basic beginner friendly projects using Flask. So if you found this very helpful, very fun to build, you can leave a comment telling me what beginner friendly projects you want me to build using Flask, or if you implemented your own URL shortener. I would love to see the GitHub link in the comments as well. So thank you very much for working on this mini project with me. So don't forget to like, subscribe if you really love Python, or if you are like me that is practically obsessed with Python framework. I'm sorry, with Python programming language. So like, subscribe, and leave a comment. So until next time, bye. Have a great day.